I got it. Hello. Welcome to CTK, Sudden Valley. I want to move this forward. They say I can't move much today. And apparently I like to move when I speak, so I'll try. Stay here, stay rooted. I'm Heidi. I'm Heather's sister, can you tell? Yeah, I've even been in Sudden Valley before and people come up to me and start talking to me like I'm Heather, and then they look really confused. So that's how much I think I look like her. So I'm excited to be here. My brother-in-law Jason asked me to preach, and I think because he knows I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it. And also, I do feel nervous because you're not my people. Like, I'm used to speaking at my church, and I look out and I look at all of them and they smile at me like, you got this, Heidi, we love you. But I'm looking out and my parents are here. and my niece and nephew are here. So, but I'm excited to preach. I'm excited to speak. It is so beautiful here, you guys. I live in Eastern Washington, and because that is where I am, and that is where we've been placed for now. You guys, I ran yesterday downtown, and the mountains, the water, oh my goodness, you are so fortunate. I'm sure you know that. But it's like God is like everywhere, everywhere. Okay, did you see how hard the mystery box actually is? Doesn't Jason make it look easy? I've been here when he does it. He makes it seem like this is the easiest thing in the world. It's so not. It's so hard. He is very, very good at the mystery box. So, all right, so Jason tells me, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I live in Pullman, Washington. That's about as far away from here as you can be and still be in Washington. It took me forever to get here because of the rain, and your traffic is terrible. That's what you have. It's so nasty here. We don't have traffic. We like 10 minutes to get across town, and everyone's complaining. Oh my gosh, it took me 10 minutes. For real, we say that. So in Pullman. Pullman is a university town. So we have a lot of professors. It's really intimidating sometimes to preach, because everybody you look at has their doctorate, and you're like, okay, good, here I am. No doctorate to speak of, no master's to speak of. So it's humbling, but I kind of enjoy it. So Jason told me you guys are in the middle of Moses. And he said, you can jump in, you can join me on Moses, or you can talk about whatever you want. And I was kind of excited because I had studied Moses last year, and we didn't preach on it because the Bible's huge, so we just didn't get to it. And I was like, oh, I've already got a couple sermons. I'm so excited. So I'm going to share the one that I landed on, the one that stuck in my heart, the one that just kind of formed as I started praying and writing. And I'm going to call this one Hidden. Hidden. Kind of the beginning of the year. I don't know if God speaks to you this way, but God gives me words. I don't know, is anybody like, sometimes God gives you words that just kind of sit in your heart for a while? So he gives me, okay, there's a few of us, not many, but he gave me the word hidden. Hidden. And I kind of felt like he said, look around at the world. Nobody wants to be hidden. They want to be like seen. They want to be on Facebook. They want to be on Twitter. You want to be on Instagram. You want to be big platform. Right? Big platform, more people. Nobody wants to be hidden. And God says, but I work in the hidden. Look what happens. People are not made for fame. Have you noticed that? What happens to people when they get fame? They fall flat. I don't know if you've been looking at the pastors, but pastors of our huge churches are falling like matched. It's so sad. It's so sad. Like after the Southern Baptist Convention, pastors keep up with this way more than everybody else. Everyone's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So the Southern Baptist Convention they're the biggest Protestant denomination in the United States by far. And they had like the Catholics, you know how the Catholic priests had their horrible, horrific moment where they found out how many kids had been sexually and women abused. So the Southern Baptist Convention has had their own kind of, this is what they've been hiding it. And it's terrible. I'm like, I can't even believe people still go to church. Like, just to be honest. I'm like, what the heck? But At the same time, I'm like, why do I keep going back? Because I have a longing for God. Like, despite the mess, despite the ugly, there's something that says, like, there's more than that. There's more than that. And so I felt God say, be okay with being hidden. Preach telling your people to be hidden. I speak to people in the hidden, in the quiet, in the stillness. And it is so not our culture. And so I was starting to look at Moses, and Moses began his life in a basket. He was hidden. He was hidden away. And so that's the beginning of his hidden moment, but it was short-lived. He was found and by the princess. And after that, his life was anything but hidden. For the next phase, he was being trained to be a prince. He would get to go to the best schools. Think about it. Have you ever thought about it? He'd get to go to the top schools that there were around. He'd be trained to be a leader. You cannot grow up in a house like that and not be trained to be a leader. You see, God was working underneath. He was getting the training that he would need to someday lead the people. You cannot be a son of a prince without being groomed to lead. And yet, we begin to see that Moses has a little bit of confusion about who he is. Who are my people? Exodus 2:11 through 12. One day, after Moses had grown up, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsfolk. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian, and he hid him in the sand. Moses fled. There's the word fled from Pharaoh. He settled in the land at Midian, and he sat down by a well. What's going on beneath the surface? Moses is being trained exterior on the outside how to lead. But what's going on inside of Moses that he could turn and rage and kill somebody? Rage, inner turmoil. I was thinking, what was going inside of the young man who killed his grandma and then turned and could kill a room full of children? What's going on inside of him? I thought, what's going inside of the pastors and priests who can harm women and children? What's going on underneath? Rage, out of control. I think sometimes we can leave it there, but then I thought, what's going inside of me when I lose it? What's going on inside of you when something simmers and you find yourself raging, or you find yourself so angry? What's going on inside of us? Like, we can be like, well, I've never killed anybody, because I haven't. I've never killed anybody. But there's moments when you're surprised by yourself, right? You're like, I can't believe I just thought that. I'm a leader. I'm a nice human being. I can't believe I just dreamed that up. What's going on underneath? What's going on? Have you had those times when all of a sudden you're just living life and something triggers you and you're really shocked by how you responded to somebody you love and care about? If you haven't, you will. And we have an option. This is what Moses did. Moses went to the well. He settled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. And you're like, what is that? The well in the Bible represents the soul. It represents the soul. Think of a more familiar story. The Samaritan woman in the New Testament. Jesus sat with her. The well represents somebody going to sit with who they are with God. He fled to God. What do you do when you lose it? What do you do when you find you're addicted to something and you can't believe it happened to you? What do you do when your marriage is like, ah? Do you go to the well? Do you look at your soul? That's the option. You can flee, you can pretend. Well, I clearly can't have thought that. I'm beyond that. I've been a Christian for a long time. That's not me. Or you can sit with it and you say, God, what's going on inside of me? I completely lost it. What's going on inside of me? What is beneath the surface? That's your option, the soul. So we don't talk a lot about the soul in church, even though if you read the Psalms, like go through and mark the word soul, it's all through there, and it's a little vague. It's a little bit of a mystery. It's a little bit of like, what is the soul? Because the soul isn't your mind. The soul isn't your heart. The soul isn't your body. It's like something different. I say the soul is where you meet with God. It kind of encompasses all those pieces. The soul is who you are with God. When I first started meeting with my spiritual director 5 years ago, she said to me, "How is it with your soul? How is it with your soul?" And I'm a pastor, and I thought, what are you asking me? I don't even know what you mean. How is your soul? And so I've been meeting with her for years and years now, and the question always is, how is it with your soul? That's what Moses was doing when he went to the well. He was checking in with God. What lies beneath the surface of our lives really matters. My awareness or lack of awareness does not make it any less real. The well is a metaphor for the soul. I'm going to show you this paper over here. So we leak as human beings, whether we want to or we don't want to. We leak. When life is hard, when life is not going as we hoped it would, which is like, let's be real, for everybody, kind of during COVID, and we leak. Your family knows it. Those closest to you know it. You leak. So I'm going to share this with you. I learned this. I'm in a spiritual formation program down in Portland, and I learned this at my formation program, and I've been processing it. And as I was looking at the life of Moses, I was like, oh, here it is. And I want to share it with you because it's helped me so much, so much. So this is called the iceberg. This is the part of life that everybody else can see. This is your managed life. It's small. Isn't that helpful to realize? That what I can see, what you show me, what I'm going to show of you is this, my managed life. This is what Moses was getting trained in, right? He was getting trained in how to lead and how to be and how to live outward. His managed life. But the bigger part of myself is my wounded life and my forming life. It's the rest of me. It's what I'll show you if I want to show you. I might not even know what's going on under here, right? I mean, most of us don't even know all that's going on. This is the wounded life. This is when you leaked. This is when Moses killed somebody in rage and confusion and hurt. This is the wounded life. And this is the forming life. Another way to say the managed life is the controlled life. Controlled. Where do you go, like Moses, when something in your life doesn't go the way you'd hoped? Where do you go when you are depressed? When something happens to your kids that just totally takes the wind out of you? Where do you go when you're wounded? It's your pivot point. Most of us go here. Here's your pivot. Where do you pivot? Most of us go here and try and control things. Try to make everything work. Try and fix it in your head and process it and do things and run around like a crazy person. Most of us manage our lives. It can be good things. Some things that I do to manage my life that are good things is yoga. It's a good thing, but it's just yoga. Some of us even do manage life with Bible study. Just keep moving. Just keep doing another Bible study. We can do good things. Have you heard of this phrase? It's kind of like, it rings true, but it's complicated. You use God to run from God. Think about it. Like you go to church and you do all the things where you really aren't meeting with God, because that's so much harder. That's the forming life. That's going down. There's a deep spiritual concept that you have to go down to get to the light. You have to go down to get to the light. During this time, I would say COVID brought the whole world to a wounded space. I would just say it's true. Some of us more than others. And I say that for me, I saw my strong desire for control. My strong desire for control. Anytime I desire something controlled, it shows me where I'm not trusting God. Any space that you need control or you feel out of control, any anxiety that you have, then you're not trusting God. When I was coming to speak here, I felt anxious because I was trusting myself and not God. If you have to have a certain amount of money in your bank account to feel secure, I'm trusting my bank account and not God. Anytime, any place, but we're invited to go down. The way down is the way to light, and you have to go to where it's hidden. There's an invitation to go from compulsive. Do you see when he killed somebody? That was compulsive. You're invited from living compulsive, like I have to do this. My house has to be this way. My life has to be this way. My kids have to be this way. You're invited from a compulsive way to a contemplative, to a stillness, to breathing. Just like Moses, our inner life is going to leak. Our inner world will go amok. We will have depression, we will lose control, we will have sleepless nights, we will have addiction, we will have financial struggles, and we have an invitation to go to the well, to go to your soul. God invites us down into our soul. We are invited to be alone with Jesus at our own well, where we pray and go to be alone. It is really hard for us in our culture to be alone. It is really hard for us to listen to Jesus. My husband and I sat down with a young couple recently, and he had 4 job opportunities: Colorado, lucky kid, California, Portland, and Seattle. And he's telling us all the things, and it's not just because he's young that he did this. He's telling us all the things, and I was like, he's like, what do you think? I'm like, did you stop and pray about it? He's like, no. He's like, I asked wise people, I thought through all the things, I studied the different cities. He's like, I didn't pray about it. And we could be like, oh my gosh, you didn't pray about it. But how many of us your first thought is you go to your managed life, and then when that's not working, then we go to prayer. Like, I tried hard, I figured it all out, I studied, I did everything, and now I will pray. Now I will pray. What if our first response is, what do you have for me, God? What are you saying? To be still is so hard. To put your phone away is so hard. To be in solitude, to be silent before God. But it is what our world needs. It needs people who are willing to be hidden with God. But yet we can't put our things away. You can't hear God if you're not willing to do those things. So think about yourself for a minute. This is kind of fun. I think it's fun. You might not. You're like, okay. So for you, is it harder for you? So for me, it's not hard to be alone. I actually really like being alone a lot. And I love silence. Like, I'm a weird person. I really love silence and solitude. But there's another part. There's stillness. In order for me to meet with God, I have to stop, not always, but the core, I have to stop moving. Is it really hard for you to be still? Some people, it's really hard. They're relational, like more relational than me, like the people. It's really hard for you to be alone. And the invitation is for you to be alone with God. Don't trust other people, maybe the extroverts. Don't trust other people. Hear what God has to say for you. Or here's another group. You don't mind solitude and you don't mind stillness, but when you sit, your brain can't stop moving. It just keeps going. Those are the brain people, the thinking. It's called the thinking triad. You find yourself in one of those? Your brain. So for you to meet with God, you have to be alone, which you're like, I like being alone. You have to be in silence, and you have to let your brain stop. That is where you will meet with God. So we are invited to be alone, to be still in silence. We don't accept solitude in our culture, but solitude settles you into the presence of God. When I take time to be quiet and alone with God, this is what it feels like, coming home. It's coming home to yourself. It's seeing who you really are. It's like, here I am. This is me. I'm myself again. God leads Moses to a hidden life in the wilderness, right? That's where he goes for 40 years. Back to he is in the wilderness for 40 years. I want you to hear this. It's not a punishment. God is not sending him to the wilderness because he killed somebody. God's not sending him there because you have a lot of penance to pay. When sin, that is the punishment for sin. Sin, God does not punish us for our evil doing. He allows the sin to do its work. When I choose to put anything above God, when I choose to be addicted to anything other than God, the thing that I'm putting, that's the punishment, being separated from God. God's not punishing him. He is working in Moses what needs to be worked out in Moses. It's going to take 40 years because Moses killed somebody, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done in his soul to prepare him to do the next piece. He has all these skills. He received these skills in the beginning of his life, but he does not have the skills to lead the people to God yet. Sin punishes people, not God. Think about it. If you think God is punishing you, it's going to be hard to be close to God. It's going to be hard to trust him. So in the wilderness is a theme in the Bible. You see it all over with the prophets. You see it with Jesus. You see Jesus inviting his disciples to get away to the wilderness. The wilderness is a stripping. It's a quieting. It's a soul work. It's preparing Moses to withstand the hardships of leading the people. He's there for 40 years. That's a long time. He was there a long time. But imagine it, what would happen? He's just out there with the animals, in the quiet, in his family. He's hidden away, becoming who he needs to be. It takes a long time sometimes. Moses there learns to listen to God. How do we know he learned to listen to God? Look at the way he led after the wilderness. I was reading in Numbers. You know what he did? He went and he asked God, what should I do? And then God told him, and he went and did it. And then he did it again. God, what should I do? He listened, and he went and did it. And then again, doesn't that sound simple? But can you imagine if you live that life? God, today, what now? I mean, you can imagine it probably wasn't just like, boom, 1 minute, 2 minutes. Maybe it was an hour he had to sit. Maybe days he had to sit with God. God, what's next? And then he did it. I can tell that his soul was deeply formed because he did it even though he was scared. Remember how he says, I stammer. He saw who he was. He saw who he was. He knew his shortcomings. He knew that he wasn't good at speaking, and he said, okay, I'll do it. Because he trusted God. He learned to trust God in the wilderness. And that's what happens to us when we go in the wilderness, is we learn to trust God. We learn to listen to God. It's still hard for me to listen to God and say, what now? And not get anxious, not get antsy, not get distracted. It's hard. But when life isn't working, we find ourselves in the wilderness. We head to the wilderness. We quiet our soul, and we can finally be still. So Ruth Haley Barton, super big fan if you haven't heard of her, love every book I've ever written. She says that in our culture, maybe the world doesn't push you to the wilderness, but she calls it fashioning your own wilderness. And she encourages people to create space, to create your own wilderness where you get away and you be with God. You sit still and you listen. You put away your distractions and you fashion your own wilderness. I can think of only 2 reasons I know that people go to the wilderness. 2 that I can think of. Maybe you'll think of another one. One is your life is a mess and you have no choice. You're desperate. You're just desperate. Nothing is working. Nothing is going. You're desperate. And if you haven't been desperate yet, you haven't lived long enough. You will. More than once. It's just the way of living. It's being human, the world. So desperate and longing. You're only going to get to the wilderness with God if you have a longing or you're desperate. You might think, I don't long for God. It's missing. You can pray for it. God, I'm not longing for you right now, but I want to. That's longing. If you have that prayer, I think sometimes we make it a really big thing, longing, but it's there. If you say, oh, I want to long for God, your longing is there. It's there. So sometimes you need somebody else even to show you your longing. I really want a cabin. I really want one. And I can't have one. I can't, but I really want one. And I tell my spiritual director often, I really want a cabin. And she says, that's your longing for God. I go, what? She goes, where do you meet with God, Heidi? When I'm by myself, in the woods, when it's really quiet. She goes, that's why you want a cabin, because what you really want is God. I don't think I would have seen that without her helping me see. Sometimes we need people to help us see that I was longing for God and I didn't even know it. Sometimes she asks me, Heidi, can you trust God? And you're supposed to say yes because you're a pastor. And I'm like, no, I actually don't think I trust God right now very much at all. And she says to me, you do, or you wouldn't be here. I see it in you. I see it in you. So maybe your longing is small to get you to the wilderness, but it's enough. I actually think that if you're here, you have a longing for God. I actually think if you get to church, sometimes we've been in our church for a while, and I think some people, I just think, I wonder why they're here. They don't participate, and it's okay, they don't participate in anything, they don't join in, but I think there's a longing. I think there's a longing in them that's waiting to be birthed, and I just pray for them. God, may they have more longing for you. So you might be asking, does everyone have to go through the wilderness? Does everybody have to do, because I didn't kill anybody. Right now I'm not addicted to anything. I haven't done X, Y, and Z. Does everyone have to go? So yeah, I think so. I think everyone does. Jesus went through the wilderness. Remember? 40 days. His was a lot shorter, lucky him. 40 days in the wilderness. I think we all have to go through the wilderness. Jesus' time in the wilderness prepared him to do what God created him to do, put him here to do. And my time and your time in the wilderness is what will strip you and prepare you to be who you were created to be the person that you were meant to be. Our wilderness can lead us to a well-formed life. Have you heard of the phrase dark night of the soul? Dark night of the soul, some of you, yeah. It's the dark night of the soul. That's where he was for a long time. Sometimes people end up in the dark night of the soul more than once. But Moses gains his soul in the wilderness. The soul is your space where you connect with God. Matthew 16:26. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? I think a lot of Christians have lost their soul. Not their salvation. That's a theology point, but your soul. I think a lot of us have lost our soul. And Jesus is calling us back. He says, come, find out who you are. Find your soul. Come be with me. Put away your stuff. Quiet your mind. I'm here. I'd like to talk to you. Bill Hybels was a pastor of the biggest mega church in Chicago, in the United States, for a long time. And he says of his church, I built a church that is a mile wide and an inch deep. And an inch deep. He says, I seriously missed something. And then later it came out that he had been very inappropriate with many women throughout the entirety of his ministry. And of course it was an inch deep. Of course it was. But in the moment when he said that, I heard God say to me, Heidi, would you be willing to pastor an inch wide and a mile deep? Would you be willing to try? Would you be willing to invite people there? Because I have to go there first, right? You can't lead anybody where you haven't gone. And I was like, yeah, but that's really humbling. It's really humbling in a day when bigger is better, right? Bigger is better, always, especially in the church. But maybe not. Maybe not. In my soul formation, this is a small church. My soul formation man, the leader, the guy who's forming our program, is a retired pastor of a Christian and Missionary Alliance. And he said, what is it about small churches and health? I don't know. Maybe you can't hide very well. Maybe if you wanted to really hide, you'd go somewhere huge. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't even think he knows. He's a very wise man. When I was thinking about this message, and I was thinking about the wilderness, and I was thinking the dark night of Moses' soul, I was also thinking of another term called the wall. So I was talking with my daughter who's in college, and I don't know if you've heard this before, but I think a lot of people haven't, that there's actually a spiritual journey that people go on, and there's phases in it. And I think maybe if people knew, then they wouldn't be so surprised when it happens to them. I'm wondering if this is where a lot of people turn from God because they didn't know this was to happen. So these are the stages in a spiritual journey. One is your coming to Jesus moment, right? It could be when you're young, could be when you're old. You come to Jesus, right? That's the first step. You say yes. And you might do it again later in your life, right? Like you're older and you decide again, yes, I'm coming to life. Then there's another place in your life with God. And it's where you live a discipled life. You start going to church. You maybe join a Bible study. You start to learn things about God. This is normal. Then next, after that, you go and you serve. Small, little. You're different in your neighborhood. You're different with the people around you. You're different with your kids' friends. You just choose to live differently. And then there's a place called the wall. It's the wilderness. And it just happens. It's a time where you do all the things you used to do and you can't hear God. You don't see God, you don't know what's going on, you're totally confused. I want you to know that that's normal. I want you to know that that's just part of the life with God. And people can freak out about it, but the thing is, if you stay with it, if you stick through it, if you trust God even when you're not hearing anything, and you keep moving forward, maybe you try some new disciplines. A lot of times it's when God will teach you a new way of relating to Him, and it's kind of exciting. You're going to come to a new place in your inner life. That's where you're going to come here, and your life will look like it never had before, and it'll be an effective life. It'll look different. I'm just wondering if people knew that there's going to be a time in your life when you come and you do all the things, and you don't hear from God, if it would help people to not give up when it happens. For a lot of Christian kids, it's college, right? So you just pray for your kids. For a lot of kids that grew up in the church, it's college. It's a little scary as a parent, like I have a college kid, you just pray and trust. You just pray and trust. And they're like, I don't want to share too much, but they're like, it's hard. And you're like, you're just praying. You just pray and trust. For people that come to God later in life, like 20s, 30s, it's usually later. Maybe you're 40, maybe you're 50, and you're like, I don't understand. But once you press through, your life with God will be like so much more beautiful and freeing than you've experienced before. I just wanted to share that. I feel like I want people in the church to know that it's just a place, it's just normal, it's the wilderness. As I close, kind of wrap up today, I like to end with invitations. What's God inviting us to? I think He's inviting us to the well. He's inviting us to put away our try-harders, our oughts, our shoulds, our controlled life. Even if they're good things, He invites you to go down, maybe to grief, maybe to tears, maybe to stillness and silence. Rather, He invites us to be still to put away our phones, our devices, the things that distract us, and to listen to him. When I sit at the well or I fashion my own wilderness, you're going to see who you truly are, who I truly am. And a lot of times I come there, this has been super helpful for me. So as you come today, you won't believe the songs. You were so listening. He was so listening to God. This happens at my church. So it is well with my soul. Sometimes I think we don't know what that means, your soul, but think about that song. That song kind of helps. It is well with my soul. He's singing it today. I was like, you've got to be kidding me, to close with. So you're listening to God. Yay. Sometimes you can wonder, am I really hearing you? Yeah, you're hearing God. You are. When you sit in that silence and you allow yourself to see who you are, sometimes it's really overwhelming. This is something that really helps me. When I really see who I am, when I really allow myself to see how broken I am and stop hiding from it, I then say to God, here I am. I can't fix it. I don't know what to do. I've already tried. Can you help me? That's the invitation. Here I am. I can't fix it. I don't know how. I've read lots of good books. I've been a Christian a long time. Can you help me? Maybe put it in your journal. And then sometimes I look back 6 months and I'm like, oh my gosh, he heard me. He heard me. You heard me. You answered. And all I had to do was say, will you help me? Will you help me? So today, as I'm going to pray, and then the worship team is going to come about a minute, I invite you to maybe say, God, I'm not really familiar with this soul language. How is it with my soul? What is my soul? And sit there with your soul, and sit there with yourself and worship. And maybe recognize areas that you were hiding from yourself, and let yourself see it. Say, here you are, God. Here it goes. Here it goes. So I'm going to pray. Kind, gracious God, thank you for calling us beloved. Thank you that first and foremost I'm loved by you. We are loved by you. God, may we long for you. May we long for you. Meet us in our wilderness. Be so close. Speak to us. May we be open to your Holy Spirit during this time of worship. Amen.